Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining this session that we're hosting today, that NetApp and Veeam are hosting. And today we're going to talk to you about why NetApp and Veeam are the perfect match for NAS. And we'll go into a bit more detail on that. I'm Grant Cayley, the UK and Ireland Chief Technologist for NetApp. And I'll be joined by Kevin Ridings, the Alliance SE for Veeam EMEA. Now, if you've got any questions, please drop them into the Q&A. You should see a button at the bottom there, and we'll either answer them as we go through or answer them at the end. Session's being recorded, and the thank you email that you get at the end will include links to all the material that's referenced or that could be of use to you going forward. So without further ado, I'll start. So it's interesting that perception is a powerful thing. I don't know how much the people on the call know about NetApp as a company, but NetApp has really been a company which has been providing data management solutions for customers for the last, well, probably about 28 years now, actually. And our heritage was, providing NAS storage for customers. You're probably well aware of the term filers. Well, actually, that was coined originally by NetApp and became an industry term really going forwards in that respect. Apologies, the dog going off here. And what we actually had was we had the fact that storage was provided for customers. NAS file services was something which we absolutely led. And through that progression, NetApp moved on to providing flash storage solutions for customers. We moved those platforms into being software defined. And actually, as we went forwards, to the current day, we're now actually providing solutions for customers in the hybrid cloud space. And that's actually quite interesting because those file services that we started providing, 28 years ago, we now can provide them not just on premise, not just on modernized flash platforms, but can actually provide them in each of the public clouds as well. So in AWS, Azure, and Google. And it's actually that multi-cloud hybrid experience that I think most of you as customers are really looking at how you address today. You've got enterprise IT, which are delivering in the data center. You've got potentially on-premise clouds with private cloud solutions that you're looking to build. And you've got public clouds and multi-clouds where you may be deploying those same solutions or same capabilities into each of those clouds as well. And NetApp's kind of solution in this space is to really help you bring those together with what we call helping you build your data fabric. How can you actually build a single continuous data fabric experience across all of those locations? So deliver a consistency around about data management, about data services, file services, and NAS, for example, and that's really important. So what the data fabric really tries to bring for you is firstly to give you a freedom of choice, to enable you to build your solutions where you need them across any of those environments. You might decide that you want to build solutions on premise. You might decide to build in AWS, Azure, and Google, but it's that freedom of choice that we provide to connect those environments together so that the data can flow between those so you can decide what works best for you. And ultimately as well, it's about bringing simplicity to the solution. Nobody wants a solution that's hard to manage, but simplicity is not just about management, it's also about cost and reducing the cost of delivering, particularly file services in each of these locations. But today and the focus of what we're talking about is really around about data protection. How do we deliver solutions that enable you to firstly provide your data in each of these locations, but also provide a consistent layer of data protection across that? NetApp provide the kind of features that sit in that, but really Veeam as our partner is what brings that to life. So the first thing we have when you're looking at a hybrid multi-cloud transformation, and actually these figures on the left were from an evaluator group survey. Give you a quick chance to have a look at those. They actually said that 50% of customers were really struggling with how they could simplify their data expansion into the hybrid cloud. As you put data out there, the complexities around about managing it are really difficult, and those challenges don't go away. In fact, they're exacerbated as you move into different environments such as private cloud and public clouds. And 76% of customers were really struggling with the increasing costs of inaccessibility to data or disruption to their data services, typically where data protection solutions would provide the kind of catch-all. So there's a lot of, a lot of challenges, not just with scaling your data, but with also how you actually reduce the cost and protect yourself against outages in those environments. And interestingly, 15% said that backups were not agile enough. The platforms which they back up to were really monolithic and just for backup, rather than opening up the possibilities of using that backup data for other purposes. So NetApp's real solution in this space is to provide NAS capabilities. We obviously do SAN as well, but that's for another conversation, and virtualization. NAS capabilities, whether you're deploying into the data center, into your remote office environments, or even into each of the public clouds. NetApp can bring our ONTAP NAS solutions into each of those environments. Those platforms all have a consistency of business continuity capability built into them: snapshot, zero space cloning, instant recovery, etc. Also across the top and connecting those environments together is the ability to snap mirror across those platforms to replicate data, particularly for disaster recovery, but also for data mobility. And then with our secondary disk platforms, they can also be used as a backup target, for example. But what's important with all of these platforms is that there's an API capability that sits across all of these. And that API capability is what we expose and what enables Veeam and NetApp to really work together in terms of providing an integrated data protection solution. NetApp provide the components, if you like, the kind of accelerated data protection, efficient features that can be leveraged, but it's Veeam that bring them together from a management and orchestration and a delivery capability across not just backup for NAS data, but also across orchestration for disaster recovery, which we'll cover in a later session. So at this point, I'm going to pass over to Kevin, who's going to, sorry, I'm not going to pass over to Kevin. With one last slide, apologies. So on the left here, if you look at what NetApp and Veeam are doing together, from a customer perspective, customers are really struggling with disjointed data management. We've got silos, as we mentioned, on premise and in the cloud. They've got a lot of untapped potential around about the data which they actually have there, not just in the data use, but actually in the confidence to use that data in different environments. And that really kind of reflects a requirement and a need for data protection on the back end. There's a real kind of issue around about complexity of managing across these environments and the challenges which that faces. And these are all customer pain points. When you look at the combination of NetApp and Veeam together, and we are better together in this sense, bringing the capabilities of both companies, the first thing we do is enable you to protect your data everywhere. And that's obviously important, not just on premise on NAS, but also on software-defined platforms and even on cloud NAS platforms as well, to be able to create value from that data rather than just have it locked and siloed, and to be able to do, to ensure that you can provide the data protection and also prove that that can be done. And then ultimately, managing data needs to be simple to do. So really, together, we can drive better peace of mind with, for your data 24/7 by 365. And I'm actually now going to pass over to Kevin, who's going to go through a nice kind of green board effect, where he's going to show the capabilities of Veeam and NetApp in a NAS configuration. Kevin.
Thanks, Grant. And just another proof of we are all working from home in these times. Live dog on the session.
Always dog, yeah, bad combination. Yeah.
It's always good. So just following on from what Grant was saying, we're going to be looking at data protection with the focus on NAS today. We looked at some storage integrations in the last session. We're going to be looking at some of our disaster recovery and extending data into the cloud in some future sessions. But today we're really going to focus on our NAS protection and why that's great and works really well with a NetApp filer. So the first thing I want to do really is sort of point out the things that we were trying to achieve here with our NAS protection. It needs to be able to scale to petabytes of data, millions of files, and really truly deliver fast incrementals and really flexible restore scenarios. So for me to go through that, really, we need to look at some of the components that we have within the architecture. So what we have here, we're going to start on the left-hand side here and look at some of the sources that we're able to protect. And it isn't just standard file shares. So we have the ability to protect SMB shares. We have the ability to protect NFS shares, anything on a managed Linux box or a managed Windows box within the Veeam interface. So, and perfect for SMB would be an ONTAP filer. As Grant mentioned in the early days, that's where NetApp started. And we haven't had the ability to protect their data on the NAS in a really powerful and innovative way until the recent release of version 10. So just on the right-hand side there, you can see the sources that we have today. And that would be, as I said, SMB, NFS, Linux, and Windows. But when we're talking about protecting NAS data, it's important to understand that we have to be able to protect open files as well. There are multiple ways that we can protect. So we can protect the direct file share. So that would be one of our options. But if we're just protecting at the file share, obviously no agent installed there or anything along those lines, we wouldn't be able to protect open files. So what we have the ability to do, specifically here with the NetApp filer, is to be able to leverage snapshots. So we're able to take a snapshot of the particular SMB share, but that's also possible. So it's with SMB, but also possible with NFS, with the exposed snapshot folder. And there's a couple of benefits there. Obviously, yes, we're taking those open files and we're not missing those open files, but it really happens with point-in-time recovery. If we're just walking a file share, as we start the backup and we finish the backup, there's an amount of time involved. With a snapshot, it is a point in time. So the file at the beginning of the backup and the file at the end of the backup will be the same point in time, if that makes sense. So really beneficial to leverage those NetApp snapshots down on the filer. But if we now look at some of the other components that we have within the architecture, but there's some new things here with our NAS protection. You can see just next to the sources, we have what would look like a repository. Well, it is a type of repository. It's actually a cache repository. And we're going to explain what we actually use the cache repo for. We also have file proxies, and these are the objects in the middle here, and these are what actually handle the movement of the data. And you can have as many of those as you wish to scale your throughput. So scaling to petabytes of data, millions of files, you would simply add more and more of these proxies. And we're seeing that out in the field, more and more proxies being added, really being able to transit an awful lot of data. And just to take a look at the last three components here before we go into what actually happens within a backup. So you can see just with it just to the right of the middle there, we have our short-term retention repo. And within the short-term retention, we keep file versions and always keep the latest file version in the short-term repo. And the retention would be set within your job. We also have just to the right and below that, we have our long-term retention. And the long-term can be on a lower cost storage, could be an object store. So it'd be great to potentially use a storage grid for the long-term repo. And then we have a third, and that is our secondary copy repo. So that gives us the ability to adhere to a rule that we always talk about here at Veeam, and that's the 3-2-1 rule. And it's really important that you adhere to the 3-2-1 rule because it gives you the ability to recover from almost any failure scenario. So let's walk through what we actually do during a backup and how we can do a very fast incremental. So we have Veeam backup and replication controlling all this. And then what we actually do on the first full, we go into, if it's an SMB share on an ONTAP device, we address the ONTAP device, we take a snapshot of that share, and then we're able to pull all the data. And all the data would actually be being pulled via the proxies. So the file proxies would be pulling all the data from the particular share. As I said, you can have as many of those as you wish. But when we're doing this, we're also creating a CRC tree. And the CRC tree is actually stored within the cache repo. And the CRC tree is what helps us perform very fast incrementals. So if we take a look perhaps in a little bit more detail of what we do with the CRC tree. So if we're actually walking the file system on that first full, and we're creating these CRC fingerprints, you can see within this architecture here, and you can see that's happening at every folder, subfolder, and that kind of hierarchical infrastructure. And we store those within the cache repo. When we come to perform an incremental, because we have this CRC tree, we then take a look at the incremental snapshot that we've taken for the incremental, and we see if any of these CRCs have changed. Now, if a file has changed right at the bottom here, the CRC fingerprint would have changed here, 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 and here. So we would know at the top level that we only need to walk down this leg. We wouldn't need to go into any other legs. And that's what really helps us create that very fast incremental. The CRC tree is actually kept in memory during a backup, so it's very fast to be able to access that and compare those, compare the CRC tree with the one we have in the cache and the one that we're seeing with the next incremental backup. So if we go back to the main architecture slide, so what we're actually doing, we're referencing that CRC tree to create that very fast incremental. But then we're passing that data via all the different proxies that we have in play. And that gives us the ability to put that across to the short-term repo. And again, that, I say, that's where we keep file versions. So if we look at the concept of file versions, so if we have a number of files, we just draw out a couple of representations of files here. So that could be version 1 of a particular file. That could be version 2 and version 3. For the archive repo to be used, if the retention was perhaps set at 2, then we would be able to move on the third backup, we would be able to move the oldest version of that file into the long-term repository. And as I mentioned, the long-term repository is often, well, can be anything, in fact. So it could be an E-series, it could be a storage grid, it could even be a hyperscaler cloud, could be Amazon, could be Azure, really helping you contain the costs. Because that's very important, not just being able to scale, not just be able to be very performant, but also to control the costs of that long-term retention. So we would move that oldest file into the long-term repo. If you've got static files in your NAS and then in the short-term repo, so something like an ISO, that ISO would never move into the long-term repo unless it was deleted. If it was deleted, it would then move into the long-term repository. But if it wasn't, it would remain in that short-term repository. So when we talk about the 3-2-1 rule, so we talk about 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types and 1 in a different location. So that 1 in a different location could be that long-term repository if that was perhaps in a different location or in the cloud. But to get those 3 copies, you need that secondary copy as well as the archive. So within the secondary copy repository, this is where you would set a definition of, perhaps this could be another one of your locations. You would have perhaps the same retention as you have within the short-term repository within your secondary copy as well. So you've got those 2 separate but same retentions, and then having those in the archive repository being off-site and perhaps, as I said, on low-cost storage. One thing I didn't mention, the cache repository. I would suggest that architecting a solution that this cache repository is logically close to your source, as well as the file proxies need to be logically close to your source. But for the cache repo, I would suggest the highest speed disk possible. It can be anything, as I said, but if you're trying to scale to millions of files and petabytes of data, having that cache repo being really quite performant would be beneficial. And the attributes on the file proxies that are important are CPU and RAM. CPU probably being the more important over RAM. As I said, you can have as many of those as you wish. So that's a very fast look through how we would perform a backup and how we walk through and use our CRC tree for creating a very fast incremental. Just before we finish up here, I just want to mention some of the restoration flexibilities as well. That's one of the reasons that we produced this very powerful NAS feature, because we wanted to provide flexibility in restoration. So not just being able to restore to the same place or just entire file shares. So we have three main types of recovery. We can recover the entire file share from either the short-term or the long-term repository to the original location, a different location, different hardware, so very flexible on that. We also have the ability, of course, to be able to recover individual files and folders and versions, depending on which repository you're coming from. So that's very flexible, in place, out of place recoveries, overwrite, no overwrite and such. But we also have the ability, which is one of my favorite parts and features here, is to be able to roll back a file share to a particular point in time. So the scenario being, if you've been infected by ransomware and maybe only some of the file share has been infected, gives you the ability to just restore what's been affected from a particular chosen point in time. It's like a differential restore. It can be very performant, so you're not having to recover all the data, but also a great value feature if you're needing to recover from something like a ransomware outbreak. So that has been, it's a very short session today in the program that we're doing. 4 of these. This is the second one. We also have one coming for VAO and also one coming for Storage Grid as well. But if we take a look at just some of the information that we have here, the VAO on NetApp is coming on July the 22nd, and the business continuity with Storage Grid is actually coming on July the 29th. This session has been recorded. There's also a number of pieces of collateral available. You can see on the link there on the slides. You will also get a copy of the green board that was delivered here today. I certainly would like to take this opportunity to thank all the attendees for coming. I will take a look to see if we have any questions, and I'll also ask Grant to comment at this stage if he has anything to add for a wrap-up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kevin. That was really good, actually, apart from my dog obviously going off in that 5-minute window when the postman arrives today. No, I thought it was really good. I mean, it's a real compliment, I suppose, the Veeam products and the NetApp products, in the sense that NetApp's providing that NAS layer plus also primary storage, but also high performance flash, which obviously could work well for the cache, the CRC cache, but then also secondary storage that could be backed up to. And then the Veeam capabilities to pull together our data management and data protection capabilities to really enhance the solution for customers and also extend that solution into the cloud, I think it is great, actually. I don't know if we do have any questions, actually. I haven't seen anything come in so far.
No, I don't see any there, Grant.
No. But I'm looking forward to the next session, actually. The VAO products, I think, is a fantastic use of the disaster recovery technologies that NetApp have, and really provides a great management framework. So I hope people get the opportunity to join that session next week as well.
Yes, looking forward to presenting that myself, Grant. Great step up in the integration of being able to leverage that underlying SnapMirror technology for disaster recovery. Really, I think it's going to be game changing. So yes, if you are planning joining the next session, please remember and do so. Okay, so as there are no questions, again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and we'll wrap up the session. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.